Well, youth unemployment in South Africa currently hovers around 70% among the 15 to 24 age group. Now, South Africans have been facing a decline in their savings in the last 2 years and face the risk of falling back to a lower to middle income status by 2028. Despite these economic challenges, there is a proposal by the Ministry of Arts, Sports and Culture to build a 22 million rand, that's about $1.3 million, monumental flag project. Now, this move has seen South Africans react furiously as it's dubbed another attempt to waste public funds. While the ministry says that it would serve as a national landmark and tourist attraction, the public has flagged down the monumental flag project. Welcome to VSA. I'm Sulaiman. Now, the Department of Arts, Sports and Culture has reviewed its decision to build a 100 million glow-in-the-dark 22 million rand monumental flag. Now, the flag, which the ministry said will help foster nationhood, will also be a national landmark, according to the ministry. South African Minister of Arts, Nathi Mswewa, has come under public scrutiny and criticism, excuse me, for the decision to even bring the project up amid a serious economic downturn. The installation of the flag would cost about 17 million rand. This according to the ministry, while 5 million rand has been set aside for geotechnical studies. The South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has ordered the minister to cancel the project. Now, what's been tagged a symbol of unity and national pride has been rejected by the South African populace. Joining me to unpack this tonight is Saul Molobi. He is a global marketing specialist, business publisher, and cultural industries practitioner. And Gogo Londiwe Ntambo. She's the project manager at Ravonia Circle. Also, Ismail Mohammed is the director, Center for Creative Arts, and arts activist. Now, all three of you joining me from Johannesburg, South Africa, thank you for your time. Let's start with you, Gogo. I'd like to start with the lady. The ministry said this project will help create 140 jobs. Now, and this is coming at a time when a lot of South Africans are asking for more jobs. Now, for a project that cost $1.3 million, is that enough justification?
Sorry, could you please just repeat that last part?
We're looking at the justification of what the minister said, that is going to give them about 140 jobs.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if the question is around whether or not that then justifies the existence of the flag, for me, it doesn't. I mean, if we're looking at the kinds of jobs that this flag will probably, or rather the installation of this flag will probably create, it won't be anything long-term in any kind of way. It's also, you know, we could be using the money that we're using for the flag for other directed efforts towards job creation, towards education, towards multiple things that we struggle with as the youth in South Africa. I just don't think that there's a link between the creation and the installation of the flag and youth development in any kind of real way.
Well, and let's bring in Ismail here to help us, stretch this. First, when this news dropped, how did you receive it?
I think there's been outrage in South Africa in large sectors, and particularly amongst young people, about the plans to install a flag. And this comes at a time where the arts sector has literally been decimated by the COVID-19 lockdown. Museums have shut down, theaters have shut down, artists have been without work for 2 years. And a department that ought to be prioritizing the livelihoods of artists is putting on a vanity project that would create some amount of work, but not necessarily for the arts sector. And even those few jobs, as my colleague explained shortly, is not sustainable in the long term. So what we definitely need in this country is greater imagination, more strategic thinking around how we strengthen our economy and how we win the confidence of a nation that has become totally disillusioned with wild expenditure by the government and a lack of accountability of state funds.
And Saul, help us, look at some of the business aspect of this. How strategic would this have been if it hadn't been, stood down?
Well, I don't think it would have been strategic at all. The argument that is being raised by the minister is that it would serve as an attraction for tourism and cultural diplomacy. Now, anyone who works in the field of cultural diplomacy will know that objects do not inform cultural diplomacy. In order to have the most effective form of cultural diplomacy, you need to reach out into people's hearts and into people's minds. And there's nobody that does that more effectively by representing a country, its history, its legacy, more than the way that artists do. And we are not prioritizing the power of artists that we have as a soft tool for public and cultural diplomacy that can begin to market our country, that can begin to profile our country abroad, that can begin to create the kind of stability that we need for our country. Wasting a enormous amount of flag at a time when our country is struggling financially, when there's been great deals of lack of accountability around the administration of public resources, is not good business sense at all. It is not political good sense, and neither is it public diplomacy good sense at all. It is not strategic under any circumstances.
Let us bring in Saul here to help us, stretch this further. Saul, have you been able to look at the marketing aspect of this whole idea? Should this have allowed to stay?
I think I shouldn't paraphrase what my predecessor has just said, but the reality is that every country has to invest sufficient resources into building monuments, into building statues, into supporting their cultural industries. And I'm not speaking for government, but I also know that the fact that in terms of our public service architecture, the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture is positioned within the economic cluster, which therefore means that government realizes that art is a strategic economic tool. So for that reason, I would say that I'm not, as a principle, against the erection of the flag. But in this instance, the timing is wrong. And unfortunately, even though the department has claimed that they've done feasibility studies, I think part of that feasibility study was supposed to factor in risk profile, and that risk profile also linking it to what could be happening in the country at that particular moment when they are about to embark on this project. And unfortunately, from the marketing perspective, I would say government has also failed to give us a clear vision of what this flag was going to be about and how it was going to be. Because I remember even the ministry struggled. Later on, the CEO of Freedom Park also came to explain, but yes, I was still not convinced. Now, in South Africa, in a country where after our negotiated settlement, we didn't destroy all the museums and statues that were erected by apartheid, it is important that the post-1994 democratic government builds new monuments which can resonate with our culture as a people, as a democratic nation, because you still have many symbols of apartheid which have been preserved. And for us, we have to counterbalance this culture by establishing our own cultural artifacts that reflects our values and our history. Culture in the form of a book, a music, a statue, or any other movement, it's a revenue generator. Therefore, it contributes to economic development of every country.
Well, talking about the development of a country, let's bring in Gogo. Help us here now. We're looking at what's been happening in South Africa lately. There's a need for unity. There's also a need for cohesion. The government said this would improve social cohesion. How much of an identity do South Africans attach to the national flag?
Yeah. I mean, I think let me start here. I mean, this idea that erecting this monument that will create social cohesion, to me, is just a little bit strange. Because the reason that South Africa struggles with social cohesion is because of our past and our deep inequalities, right? I mean, South Africa is one of the most unequal societies in the world. And a lot of that is attached to our history. So it's attached to the ways in which we think about race, the ways in which we think about class, and the ways in which those things play out as oppressions for real people in their day-to-day lives, right? So if we want to talk about social cohesion, I think it's important for us to, particularly in the post-apartheid era, I think it's important for us to then talk about how do we deal with inequalities, with the social inequalities that exist, in order for people to be able to see themselves as South African, as human beings, without those sort of limitations. I don't think that we can have a situation where we have social cohesion when we haven't dealt with those sort of real life kinds of injustices that people face every day. So the second thing to say, I mean, more directly to your question around whether or not people attach their identities as South Africans to the flag. I mean, I think a lot of work was done around the Rainbow Nation post our negotiated settlement, right? And I think a lot of South Africans, sort of bought into that kind of narrative of being one, of being united. But the limitation again comes from the fact that we can't be one and be united and still have people who live in abject poverty, still have people, majority of this country lives below the poverty line, right? And so you cannot have people prioritizing their national identity over the fact that they haven't eaten today. I think that that's a little bit difficult to ask people to do, and to ask people to do that with people who then who are hoarding wealth on the backs of the poor. I think that that's a difficult ask. So for me, it's really important that when we talk about national cohesion or social cohesion, we speak about some of the injustices that people face that we need to deal with. And then I think lastly, just to say that I really am puzzled by the way that then the president responds to people's response, so to people's response around the flag, to just say, oh, well, I told him just cancel it. I mean, I think that undermines our politics and the ways in which people engage politics, first of all, because he was part of the decision-making process that made this flag possible. And so why was it not questioned in the beginning, from the get-go? Why was it not questioned at cabinet? What are the real reasons that they can tell us or can show us that erecting this flag will in fact create social cohesion?
You know, Gogo, let me butt in here, Gogo, quickly here, because now you're asking the whys. Do you think it is a case of an afterthought? You know, try to gauge the feelings, the outrage of the people, making the government to backtrack on this?
I don't think it's an afterthought, to be honest with you. I think it shows us that our government is incredibly distant from its people. And there's a clear disconnect between the way in which our government is thinking and the ways in which people themselves are thinking. And I think that disconnect is showing itself clearly in this kind of decision making.
Let me bring in Ismail here. Ismail, again, thanks for your time. They say art unites people, and in this case, it's sort of been tied to arts, but quite different from music that unites everyone, and even sports. So, what is it that the people, or rather the government, isn't getting straight by actually putting these within the space of that sector of art?
I don't think there's a respect of value around the currency that artists hold, and no respect for the currency of our voices, our bodies, and our minds. This is not the first time that the government has erred with the Department of Arts and Culture. There are many instances over the last 27 years where the department has erred terribly with regard to the way it engages the arts sector. And I'd like to touch on, for example, just what the elder in the room, Solomon has mentioned, and I agree with him that we have a responsibility to transform the landscape of our country so that we have monuments that talk to the past with monuments that talk of the present. And that the artists can be instrumental in giving momentum and shape to those monuments. Now, there's been no shortage of monuments that have been built in our country post-1994. What we've seen is a Red Location Museum in the Eastern Cape collapsing. We've seen the Apartheid Museum shutting down. We've seen the Johannesburg Art Gallery in total disarray. Even Robben Island, which ought to be our anchor monument for our democracy in South Africa, is failing hopelessly. So it's not a case of whether arts doesn't have currency or whether artists are not engaging with our government fully. Our government is arrogant, and government is disconnected, and government is not listening. And part of that is that over the last 10 years, our country has been in deep crisis, and government has failed to acknowledge that. And artists have used many ways in which to express that through music, through poetry, through dance. Over the last 2 years, the arts sector has said constantly and quite vociferously that this minister is not engaged with the arts and is disconnected with the arts. And we've been saying that in isolation as artists. What's happened with the flag debacle is that the larger part of our nation has finally agreed with the arts sector, that the minister is disconnected, the minister doesn't understand the arts sector, the minister doesn't have priorities around nation building. Now, in a country such as ours, where we talk about social cohesion and about how symbols can assist with social cohesion, we don't have to look at social cohesion only in terms of black and white and the kind of race history that we have in our country. The biggest form of disjuncture that we've had in our country is how South Africans have been xenophobic to people from across our continent. And we've seen horrible violence, we've seen malicious anger from South Africans to our brothers and sisters from across the continent. Not a cent is invested by our Department of Arts and Culture for work that builds cohesion between Africans of the diaspora.
Well, let me bring in...
and that should be our priority, not a flag.
So, sorry to butt in here. I thought you were done there. Apologies. Let me bring in Saul. Listening to you, one of the key things that readily comes to mind is the conditionality clause there. If the people hadn't complained, if that amount isn't just huge at a time where South Africans are very, very critical of what goes on in the economy. Saul, help us here. If this wasn't about $1.3 million, do you think that this would have caught the eye of the people?
Perhaps let me say the public outcry against the flag project and the fact that government was forced to review the project is a celebration of our democracy. that despite all the challenges we could be facing as a country, our people are able to take a stand against whatever decision that government is coming up with. Now, the other good thing about our democracy is that we have a free and open, fair media regime. So even if maybe this wasn't known now, even in terms of our parliamentary process, the minister was supposed to take his budget to parliament, and the media covers this, and it's even live on TV. But the other thing is that also along the way, through cultural networks, we were going to be able to pick this up. And we have a very strong cultural civil society in this country. It was still going to raise their objections to this issue. With me, what I'm trying to emphasize is that in principle, I'm not against the building of monuments. We have to do that so that our people can be exposed to the kind of values that we want them to imbibe. But the other thing is that we are not just talking about social cohesion in terms of non-racialism. It also cuts across all the demographics, that it should be non-sexism. But beyond that, we are also saying that we have to take a stand as a country against xenophobia. Just this morning, and it's a pity now I sound as a government spokesperson, government was supposed to be here to speak for itself. But just this morning, the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services in South Africa issued a statement celebrating the adoption of the World Anti-Racism resolutions at a conference which was taking place here in South Africa. And that statement was issued against racism, but also against xenophobia. But for us, from a business perspective, we are now talking about the integration of Africa into one common market through the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. So it means it is in our interest. South Africa, as a small country as we are only 64 million. For us to be able to compete with all the foreign brands that are brought into the continent, we have to be able to access our continental market. And as the Continental Free Trade Agreement will be removing all the tariffs, this means that our products from South Africa or from any other African country will be affordable to all the African consumers. Therefore, we will gain a price competitive edge against all foreign brands that are dumped into the continent. So I would say, yes, we value integration. And out of that, yes, we are against, as a country, as a people, we are against xenophobia. We are against sexism, gender-based violence. We are against racism. This should ultimately constitute social cohesion that the flag project was intended to be.
Let me stay with you for a bit. Let me stay with you for
even communicating it to us themselves.
So apologies. Let me stay with you for a bit before I go to Gogo. And it has to do with some of the key things you highlighted. And I want us to actually stretch it now and look deeper. Now, you've said something which is quite instructive here, that is a gain for the democracy, for a government to listen to the people and having a review, to set back and say, okay, look, let's have a review. But quite frankly, I also wanted us to talk about the figure, talking about the amount which has enraged South Africans. From the business angle, if you're not against, I know you're not speaking for the government, but looking at monuments and things that should be put in place not for South Africa alone, but for the continent and for the world, do you think, have you been able to, look at that figure, 22 million rand?
That's why I said, from where I'm standing, I think the department failed to communicate the vision of this project that they were embarking on. They couldn't tell us how it was going to look. They couldn't tell us the specifications, because ultimately the specifications will determine the price, which is very unfortunate. Perhaps I must also say, between 2012 and 2016, I served as South Africa's Consul General to Milan. And when I was there, I decided to fundraise for a huge mural from the private sector. I didn't have to pay to use our public funds in erecting that huge mural in Milan, which today is still working as a tourist attraction for the city. I then spoke to young South African men. I said I needed to put Mandela's statue. He said, how much? I said, 18,000 euros. He gave me the money. And the statue is still there. It's a tourist attraction. So you don't need so much money from the state coffers. Sometimes you can engage all these business people who are in the country, and they may partner with you, because nowadays we talk about strategic collaborations and partnerships.
Well, I'm happy you've been able to expatiate that. We come to you, Gogo, and you see, this is coming at a time that a lot of things are happening in other African countries. Specifically, let's talk about Nigeria. And some other Africans, like South Africans, are saying that, wait a minute, this is how it starts. When you sweep this under the carpet, when you look away, it gets to a point to the extent that it will now affect every sector of national life. For instance, now there's load shedding in South Africa, when Nigeria once upon a time will look to South Africa as an example. So now the criticism against the minister's failure to help South African artists during the pandemic is also on the table. So is this a case of a lack of priority, or just a man trying to appease his own desires?
I think it's a clear lack of just prioritizing. I think there are lots of things within the arts sector, within that industry, that need attention. During the lockdown, some artists got together. I know it was some actors as well as musicians who got together to protest against the lockdown and its effects on the music industry and on the arts industry generally. And for me, if you haven't done anything to solve those issues, but you choose, because these are decisions that are being made, right? I don't want us to have this conversation as if this was not decided. This is a decision that Cabinet and the minister took, right? Cabinet approved this flag being erected at its 22 million, right? For me, it seems like these are clear decisions and clear priorities, or rather lack of priorities, that's happening here. And I think, in a situation where like one of the colleagues was saying earlier on, there's a strong civil society space and a strong cultural space in South Africa, of course. And I think one of the most important things is our ability to dissent and our ability to discuss these things and to call out when government is not doing things that we think that they should be doing. So when the government is not prioritizing what we think as citizens or as people who live in this country, what we think that they should be prioritizing, our ability to call that out is incredibly important. And I think that we're showing a clear strength there as people in exercising our democracy to say, well, you're not going to do that because it does not serve our democracy in any kind of way. It doesn't serve the people in any kind of way. So for me, there's a clear, I don't know whether to call it a lack of prioritization, but just Yeah, let's call it that, a lack of prioritization from our minister.
Well, Gogo, Ismail, and Saul, we'll take a moment. When we come back, we'll talk more on how this can actually be pushed forward for the good of South Africa and for the continent. That's when we return. Join us again. Well, if you just joined us, you're welcome. You're watching VSA here on News Center Television, broadcasting live to 54 African countries and beyond. Now, in 2017, a statue of then South African President Jacob Zuma was erected in the northwest of the country. Now, these kinds of projects paint South Africa's propensity to ignore the people's demands at the expense of what citizens tag as frivolities. Now, Zuma's statue at the time cost about 6 million rand. That's an amount enough to make a difference in the life of some South Africans. Now, food fuel prices have risen in South Africa in the past few months, with interest rates in banks also expected to soon increase. Now, South Africa also recently donated up to 50 million rand to Cuba, now which has less hunger than South Africa. Now, other than civil society organizations and the South African populace, trade unions under COSATU have also called for the cancellation of the project. Still with me here is Saul Molobi, Gogo Londiwe, Tambo, and Ismail Mohammed. Well, thanks for your time. We're coasting home now, so let's come back to you, Ismail. The Parliament has agreed had agreed to this move. Now, listening to Gogo, and she said it looks like, not putting the priorities right. Is it surprising that the watchdogs in government did not also find this wrong at that time?
Well, I think a fundamental problem with our leadership, and which has given cause to much of the problems and failures of our government, is that there's been far too much closing of ranks, a lack of interrogation, a lack of critical thinking, and a lack of oversight. But the parliamentary committees for arts and culture should have interrogated this a lot more critically. I don't think they did. And this is the result of what we're experiencing at the present moment. But there's a history where the parliamentary portfolio for arts and culture has not interrogated reports tabled by the Department of Arts and Culture. And I'll give you a few examples. For 3 consecutive years, the minister announced that a theatre will be built in the Limpopo province. And for 3 consecutive years, we have not seen a theatre developed in Limpopo province, and nobody in Parliament has interrogated the minister. So essentially what could happen in those parliamentary portfolio committees is that a PowerPoint is presented by the DG, the Director General, with some facts, some figures, some colorful wording and so forth, and no deep interrogation. And unless our parliamentary portfolio committees begin to realize that the fault for our democracy and the failures of our democracy really rest with them, before it even goes to cabinet, we will have a far more robust democracy in our country. At the present moment, what we have is a disgruntled nation and a disgruntled population that cannot tolerate government's incompetence, its maladministration, and its corruption any longer.
And Ismail, let me stay with you for a bit now, because this, you will talk about people who are disgruntled. There must be, there are reasons why they stay that way. And for South Africans, they've had enough on the plate, and that is why this is something that the government must look into to avert, a disintegration of any form of crisis. What are those key things you think the government should be looking into now to make sure that the people stay united, irrespective of what this flag project is about?
Well, we've come from a history of enormous racial division in our country. We've been able to work towards social cohesion with the Mandela dream and post-Mandela dream with Tutu and so forth. Our country has not become more polarized now, not just on the issue of race, but also on issues of economy and a range of other factors, simply because government has not cared. And I think unless we don't have a much more responsive and a caring government, we are not going to see that. Now, this week, the president said, when he made his speech about cancellation of the flag project, there was not even an iota of empathy in his address. He laughed, humored throughout that speech. And that is not the conduct of a responsible president. That's the conduct of a maverick. And what we're seeing in our leadership at the present time is from a country that provided the world with the best leadership, the best constitution. We're moving towards mavericks who are failing our country and betraying the legacy and betraying a future for the future of generations of South Africans. And I think what we really need to begin to see is a greater resurgence in protest in our country. Because unless we don't have an increase in protest in our country, we are not going to be able to shake this government to wake up to its senses.
And Saul, is that some kind of good? We're trying to look at some positive things to be taken out from this project against what the public outcry is about.
The Arts and Culture Department spoke about a flag project building social cohesion. And Ishmael has alluded to that, the concept of rainbow nation. But I also want to say, and I know political is my elder, but I also want to correct the myth that the issue of non-racialism, which publicly became communicated as a rainbow nation, wasn't just a Mandela miracle, one of those Mandela miracles, but it comes from the Freedom Charter, when all our people got together and they said the people shall govern. They designed this concept, this construct of the people, which spoke to everyone across the race demographic in South Africa. I think we should always go back to the 50s when the Freedom Charter was adopted, so that people do not say non-racialism will never materialize because it was just Mandela's dream. No, it wasn't Mandela's dream. It was a dream enshrined, developed by our people across the political spectrum in the 1950s. Now, yes, there's a dire need for social cohesion, but we should also remember that the economy is the base. It determines relations which will be formed in your superstructure, your societal relationships. And we look at from late 2019, the turn of 2020 up until now, COVID struck, and as it broke, it threw all the economies into a crisis. Vulnerable economies like ours, were further thrown into a crisis, because remember, with South Africa, just before 2020, 20 March, all the three credit rating agencies had downgraded us below the junk status. And then there was the lockdowns to contain COVID-19. Our economy went further down. Now, right now, even when people rise against this planned 22 million expenditure, it's simply because it's something that has been building in the past 3 years. And those of us in South Africa also know that the cultural sector organized itself, and we saw artists even staging sit-ins in the offices of the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, demanding that they manage the arts and the cultural industries properly. So this is where I say we have to celebrate our democracy. But for government, my advice is that they need to establish strong collaborations between the arts sector, the media, and the private sector and government itself. And South Africa has that model which works fairly well. If you look at the network model, where labor, civil society, government, and the private sector will always get together to discuss policy decisions, so that by the time a policy is translated into a bill in Parliament, all the social partners have already made input into that document. So the same model should be transferred into the arts and culture space, where government can then reach out to cultural organizations, to individuals, to institutions, even to the private sector. Because yes, we know our government is under serious fiscal constraints. Therefore, private sector may come in to participate in the development of our industries. The arts are also very critical, especially if you look at South Africa, where between grade 1 and grade 12 of schooling, there's a 40% dropout rate. So, which means that we could be looking at using the arts in empowering those youngsters who are dropping out of schools. And ultimately, they will develop social ills, which will cause more mayhem to our communities.
Well, I think let me bring in Gogo here to help us, expatiate more on this all-important conversation. You know, the corruption scene in South Africa is a problem already, as most citizens look at the past. How can this narrative be turned around now that this is making them look back and say, wait a minute, we mustn't allow this be a part of what we've seen before?
Sorry, which narrative? Please, could you just repeat for me?
Talking about the narrative of the flag project, the outrage that some South Africans are expressing at the moment is also a little bit linked to the past government's spending, and that's why they're kicking against this.
Okay, yes. I mean, I think, one of the many crises that we have in South Africa is one of corruption, right? And I think that the ways in which government has misused funds before like just regular corruption where with the COVID-19, for example, with those funds that were meant to be for that intervention, funds going missing. It's a real crisis in South Africa when we speak around corruption. But I think more than anything else, with this flag and the narrative around the flag, my issue isn't the lack, not only the lack of consultation. Like if they had held one what do we call it, town hall or in Bizo, somebody would have told them that this is not a good idea. But it's not just the lack of consultation for me, but it's just a poor decision making for me. that if you sit down as a government that is in crisis economically, as my colleagues have alluded earlier on, that is in crisis in other fields. I mean, if you look at, I mean, we can pull up anything. We look at health, we look at education, we can pull up any public good in this country, and it's likely that we will find a crisis or something that needs our intervention. To sit in a room and then nobody, you know, sort of points out that, well, no, this isn't something that we should be prioritizing. Before we even get to the conversation about corruption, this shouldn't be a priority, or at least in this kind of way. I think before we even get to the conversation around corruption and whether or not this is an excuse to steal, you know, which is also quite possible. Before we even get to that conversation, we must have a conversation about, one, the lack of consultation, but more importantly, just the poor decision making that we're seeing.
Will this, Gogo, let me stay with you for a bit. Will this be sound enough? Will this have been sound enough to have spent that money on the development of other tourist attractions?
You know, I mean, I'm not really an expert in how in the tourism industry, for example, and you know, how that has been hit by COVID, and I'm sure we can pull up the stats for that. But I would have prioritized something else. I really would not have prioritized 22 million rands into this flag. I mean, artists have really been struggling since COVID has hit. And so how do we make sure that they are the ones benefiting from this department? And I mean, as my colleague was mentioning earlier, there are so many monuments that were built post-apartheid and were put together post-apartheid that have closed since COVID hit. I mean, Lily's Leaf is one. The Apartheid Museum is another one. And so why are we not making investments into those places? And why aren't we creating space for artists to be able to, you know, create other ways that we can think about social cohesion and that we can think about national questions? I'm not against having the arts and the culture industries be the ones that help us think through our national questions. What I am against is there being just a sort of misplaced kind of prioritizing of a project that doesn't really help us with that conversation. What about creating spaces for artists to get together and to have political discussions and to answer the national questions? Happy to have those spaces. Maybe that's where we should be placing our money and be placing our priorities. So for me, it's really just misplaced.
And Ismail, as we wind down, let's talk more about unity. You know, looking at happenings lately and talking about the divisions which are so evident. What is it that you think politicians aren't doing, you know, nicely to ensure that the people stay, you know, get better, you know, living together as one united South Africa? I think you have to help me unmute your microphone.
Sorry about that.
No,
I think there's a loss of a moral compass. Firstly. Secondly, is a total disconnect. Third is just being totally tone deaf to the issues in our country. But also, I think there's a total misdirection or a stepping away from the values of the founding values of what birthed our nation and the values of our constitution. Now, I'm incredibly passionate about our flag, and I think the majority of South Africans are passionate about our flag. We carry it on our faces when there's soccer matches, we carry it on our shirts, we carry it wherever we go. But what we don't need is, in the face of hunger, poverty, youth unemployment, a wastage of money on a flagpole that will do nothing for us. Now, anyone who studies the way new monuments are being constructed around the globe will realize that the time for monuments that are static are over, long over. Monuments need to be interactive spaces, they need to be engaging spaces, and they need to be interpretive spaces that people need to be able to walk in and out of them. People need to be able to have programs that take place within those particular monuments. And if we are not beginning to just understand the shift in the way monuments are supposed to become meaningful to our lives, then we need to really go back to our drawing board in many, many ways. But I think our government needs to go back to its founding values of what birthed us as a nation, and it needs to go back to what Mr. Malobi spoke about, is that Freedom Charter that spoke about unity, that spoke about the kind of country we envisage, and for which many people in South Africa have given their lives for, and our government walks on their graves. We need to stop government in its tracks right now from doing that.
And let's see if we can close with you, Saul. And, you know, politics is really, really an interesting thing. But in Africa, you know, as they say in every part of the world, politics is local. And from the municipality elections, you know, we just witnessed in South Africa has shown how, you know, disenchanted some of the people have been going by what the ruling party suffered. Now, it comes back to listening. And Ismail said something about tone deaf. How can the political leaders listen more so that they don't make such false start?
My take is that it's in the nature of politics. If leaders don't want to listen to the citizenry, the citizenry will still listen to the voices that make sense, voices that carry their aspirations. And looking at our recent history from 1994, electoral history up until today, what used to be your big parties have lost support, and we have seen the emergence of new parties that people have voted for. And for me, it means that even if the leadership may not listen to us or to the voice of reason, the voters, the electorate, will listen to that voice, and they will vote with their feet by walking away from the parties that they've historically supported. But let me also say, yes, South Africa has emerged out of over 9 years to 10 years of hardship. And I would say, because I'm talking to artists, Gramsci says in this interregnum, the new are struggling to be born because the old are refusing to die. So in this period of transition, there's a new leadership that is emerging, but obviously there are older tendencies which we still have to get rid of for this new leadership to be truly born and to preside over this country. And it may not be the leadership of one particular political party. It could also be coalitions of various political parties governing our people.
I think it's a fine place for us to leave it. I'd like to thank you all for being such nice company. Many thanks, Saul Molobi, Gogo, Lundiwin, Tambo, and Ismail Mohammed. Thanks for your views, as always, and thanks, Africa, for watching. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.